G7 report, the global interstate system. The state has traditionally been the subject of most interest to scholars of global politics because it is viewed as the institution that creates warfare and sets economic policies for a country. So naay state stories or beliefs sa interest of scholars tungod kay nakita kini sa organisasyon sa mga military nga gaset of policies para sa nasod. This manifests the efforts of countries and governments in the world to cooperate and collaborate together. Next, internal and regional economic bound bodies such as IMF, World Bank must be also often that they push neoliberal reforms of the world. Makita or masabot ang efforts of countries and governments sa kalibutan nga ni cooperate and collaborate together. Next, the global governance in the 21st century. It would open the possibility of the emergence of people of global governance to fill the void. These are our need for some sort of global governance to help deal with the problem. The flow of criminal elements as well as their products is drugs, laundered money. Those bought and sold in sex trafficking is a strong factor in the call of global governance. Another set of issues that has led to calls for global governance involves heterogeneous and events within nation states that are states themselves other form and carry out. It would open the chance of something might exist happen or to be true or governance, a form of global governance para ipuno or mapuno ang no-legal force or effects in that place kinahanglan sa uban or a group of people with a governance na motabang or a great support para sa mga problema. Next, effects of globalization to governments. One of the key aspects of the state sovereignty is the government. It is a group of people who have the ultimate authority to act on behalf of a state. Each state has its own right to self-determination and that other countries should not intervene in the affairs of the state unless there are extraordinary reasons to do so. The decisions that conflict and the resolution of the conflict are done through the institution of government established and codified in that particular state. Isa kasulbaran sa status sa state sovereignty is ang government, mga grupo sa mga tao nga naay power to give orders or make decisions of living existing. Matag usa niini adunay kaugalingon nga balaod nun to self-determination of the other country. Additional challenges. Saddam Hussein was the ruler of Iraq in 1990. He decided he was going to take over the oil fields of Kuwait. He invented Kuwait and took it over. Soviet era is another instance of intervention in the autonomy of the state. Russia intervenes in the affairs of people in Crimea who want to become part of Russia again even though they are part of Ukraine. This is a case of how there might be national identity with a country that is assisted by a neighboring country. A new constitution was created and a government was elected. The United Nations intervened in Sudan because of the several years of civil war. Next, challenges form national identity movements. The next challenges are part of a national identity or movement. It is important to know that a nation has cultural identity that people attached to. Different people with different identities can live in different states. The Catalans live primarily in Spain, but we can also find of them in France. Scottish nationalism is another example that challenges the traditional notions of state sovereignty. In 2014, Great Britain had voted in Scotland and decided whether Scotland was going to become its own autonomous state apart from Great Britain. Ang challenges are parts of the national identity or movements. Importante nga mahibaluan nga ang nation adunay cultural identity para sa mga tao nga maka-attach. Lain-lain sa nga mga tao nga adunay lain-lain nga mga identities can live in different states. Catalans live primarily in Spain but we can also find in France. Ang Scottish nationalism is lain nga example sa challenges. Global economics. The third major source of challenges comes from global economics. Global economy demands the state to conform to the rules of free market capitalism. Government austerity comes from developments of organizations that cooperate across countries, such as WTO and regional agreements, such as NAFTA, the European Union. and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Neoliberal economics or neoliberal capitalism started in the 1980s. It focuses on free trade and dismantling trade barriers. Free trade was seen as the ideal or the normative belief that is the best economy is one where there is free trade everywhere. Neoliberal economics is seen as a trait of general because a state cannot protect its own economic interests as the sovereign state business from developed countries put their factories and pay people to build factories and produce goods in developing countries worldwide. Greece is one example that explains how neoliberal economics can threaten the sovereignty of the state. Ang tulo ka major source or gigikanan sa challenges gikan sa global economics. Global economy demands states to be similar rules of market capitalism. Ka-focus po siya sa free trade. Ang dismantling first barriers ang free trade kay nakita as ideal or the normative belief. Neoliberal economics is nakita as trait in general tungod kay ang state dili makaprotekta sa iyang kaugalingon nga economic interest. Next, global social movements. Social movements are movements of people that are spontaneous or that emerge through enormous grassroots organization. The idea is that there are certain rights that states cannot neglect or generally what we call human rights. If a country decides that they are going to have a particular policy and if the policy violates the international standard of human rights, this means that if somebody is sentenced by death penalty and somehow he is in a country around the world, there are rules against that state extraditing into the United States. The environmental movement is another example of global social movements related to public policy. Consensus on women's rights is another example in many countries. Arguably, the biggest conflict between the West and the fundamentalists, Islam is over the role of women in society, as well as women's autonomy. Ang plano adunay certain rights nga ang states dili maka-fail or to do something kung ang nasod mo decide nga adunay particular nga mga polisiya o kung ang policy ma-violate sa isa ka tawo sa international standard of human rights. Ang environmental movement is lain nga sample sa global social movement nga related sa public policy. Arguably ang dako nga problema o away sa West and fundamentally Islam. Next, the relevance of the states and aim at globalization. It has four elements: the people, territory, government, and sovereignty. First is element of state is a permanent population. This population does not refer for a nomadic people that move from the one place to another in an indefined time. The government regulates regulations among its own people and with other states. It is important to differentiate the idea of nation from state. Nation refers to a people rather than any kind of normal territory boundaries. If we talk about the Philippines as a nation, we refer to our shared collective notion of democracy, our history, and our collective identity. In other words, the state is a political concept while a nation is one cultural concept. This brings us to the concept of the nation-state. In reality, it is difficult to think of any nation as having any shared national identity. The other side of this argument in support of the nation-state is the global processes of various kinds are not as powerful as many believe. In addition, some question the porosity of the nation-state by pointing or a related point is that it would be a mistake simple to see globalization as threat to a constraint on. Ang relevance of the state and globalization kay adunay upat ka elements and we have people, territory, government, and sovereignty. Una is elements sa state nga permanente sa populasyon. Kini ang population wala ga-refer sa nomadic people nga mulayo or move sa isa ka lugar o mobalhin sa lain nga lugar sa tinuod lisod hunahon sa bisan unsa nga nation as having shared national identity. That govern international. There are several organizations, the movement of countries around the world, individuals participate in. This includes United Nations, International Court of Justice, NAFTA, and NATO. There are also non-government organizations promoting social and economic peace, Treaties and military alliance, the UN and NATO. Global politics entails relationship of countries and different governments and non-governmental organizations. The term United Nations was coined former U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1942. It started with 50 representatives from different countries. It functions in 4 areas: military issues, economic issues, environmental issues, and human protection, maintaining peace and building friendships. A number of goals in UN. There are 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council: the United States, Britain, Russia, China, and France. The global politics step a relationship sa bansa ug sa lain-lain nga governments and non-governmental organizations. A United Nations is one of the success involving organizations sa kalibutan nga diin ang nation states gamit to think about or discuss something carefully in order to make a decision. So ang United Nations, Global Economic Associations, WTO, and the NAFTA. Ang Global Economic Association is gibuhat sa 162 countries sa tibuok nasod ug gibuhat ang naay goal or pangaday sa increasing free trade. Kini nga mga nasod makapalit og makatindas sa mga goods sa matag usa. Then ang tariffs gaprotekta sa mga negosyo ug kompanya sulod sa nasod. Then ang WTO mas kaprotekta sa dagko nga companies and corporations. Globalism and globalization. Ang globalism is gasat sa network of connection para makaabot sa other countries ang mga transcendence. So, karon nga generation, ang contemporary world is being connected sa internet ug nana sa advanced technologies. Today, mas maka-attach og dako nga tapok nga sa tawo sa tibuok kalibutan. Example nini, kung sa magtinda ka usa ka produkto sa personal is dili siya dali mahalin o kumpara sa online nga mahalin jud siya og dali. Kung una sa European trader, maabot og pila ka days or weeks nga mabaligya ang usa ka produkto, pero karon it would take few minutes or seconds na lang para maka-sell by and ug ang mga produkto gumikan kini sa computers and network of connections. Next, global citizenship. Citizenship is associated with rights and globalization obligations. Citizenship is moral and ethical disposition that can guide an understanding of individuals or groups of local and global contexts. Global citizens might be a new type of people that can travel with these various boundaries and somehow make sense of the world. These globalizations created enemies because, according to one broad view, globalization blame either westernization or global capitalism. It also provides education programs in areas where there are no schools. Global citizenship. Citizenship is associated with rights and obligations. These globalizations created enemies because, according to one broad globalization blame either westernization or global capitalism. It is also provide education programs in areas where there are no schools. Dinhig nga organisasyon kahimog mga kahitungod ug matod sa broad view din ka-provide sila og edukasyon program sa lugar nga walay eskwelahan ug ang UN mao ang ga-promote o ga-protekta sa human rights through different organizations. Ang NATO manahimo pagkahuman sa Second World War.